show will be brought to you by I Can't F***ing Believe It. I can't f***ing believe it. For when the I can't believe it Edvard Munch scream emoji doesn't quite convey how much you cannot f***ing believe it.
I think this is how many of us felt on Monday, and many of us still feel like this right now. As I'm sure all of you know, on Monday, Chuck Schumer failed to whip his caucus and keep a united front in the fight to preserve the ACA subsidies. If you don't know already, none of the 7 Democrats and the 1 independent who voted with the Republicans to end the shutdown is up for re-election in 2026. So I think Schumer coordinated this behind the scenes, just like he did in March, except this time he was too chicken shit to admit what he'd done. All of the other Democrats who voted no, including Schumer, get to argue that they kept fighting. But this was a huge letdown for voters. We were riding high on the best election results in almost 10 years. Polling showed that voters were blaming Republicans for the shutdown, and Trump even admitted it publicly himself. We had hope again. Now, my problem is not so much with the fact that Dems ended the shutdown. It had to end soon because of the cruelty and suffering that Trump was causing. My problem is with the time. They could have gotten out in front of the media ahead of the vote and said, there's no end to how cruel Trump and the Republicans will be. And it's not likely that they would extend the ACA subsidies. They're literally in court fighting right now to starve families over Thanksgiving. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to give them that power. And we all know that the promise of Republican senators to hold a vote on the subsidies doesn't amount to anything. Even if it passed the Senate, Mike Johnson would either never bring it up for the vote in the House or Trump would just veto it. But they could have talked about the other important concessions that they did get on Monday, like restoring and increasing funding for SNAP and fully funding it through September next year, as well as getting 4,000 federal employees who were fired restored to their positions with back pay. So on Monday, Indivisible launched its largest primary program in response to Senate Democrats surrendering on the shutdown vote. Ezra Levin said, this is no longer about them, it's about us. We're done waiting for Democrats to find their spine. We can't afford a weak and cowardly Democratic Party while the authoritarians invade our cities, terrorize our communities, and threaten our democracy. We get the party we demand, and we intend to demand a Democratic Party that fights. Some of you may have been on the call earlier today with Ezra and Leah. They addressed the question of why we're fighting amongst ourselves when the bigger problem is fascism. And to that I say, we have no chance of taking back the House and possibly the Senate if we don't have candidates who people are passionate about. Some people say Democrats have a gerontocracy problem and we need generational change. And I think that's definitely true in some ways. But I think the bigger problem is the hold that corporate lobbyists have on the establishment Democrats. No one wants to vote for the democracy we had a few years ago because it wasn't working for anyone. Both parties are full of elites, many of whom are Nepo babies, whose parents were in politics. We need new blood, people who are passionate about voters who aren't part of the 1% and aren't beholden to their corporate donors. So Solidarity Warriors will be supporting progressive candidates in primaries who we think can motivate people to get off the couch and get to the polls. Indivisible National is doing the same and may even get involved in some races in Colorado. They mentioned Hickenlooper twice on the call today. And it's not about appealing to the moderate. It's about motivating people who don't usually vote, who don't care about politics, or who are so worried about their day to day economic problems that they don't have time to care. And I'll leave the shutdown talk there for now. I could go on all night, believe me. But we have an important announcement to make, and then we have a great guest speaker coming up. Yesterday, Solidarity Warriors, along with a coalition of grassroots organizations, launched the coordinated nationwide mass blackout action. Morgan's at their organizing meeting right now, so I'm just going to go over some basic information. So here's the website. The blackout will be from November 25th to December 2nd. And we're calling on everyone in this country to stop online or in-store shopping, except for small businesses. Stop work. Avoid ad-driven platforms like streaming and scrolling on social media. Cancel subscriptions and make no digital purchases. If you must spend, support small local businesses only and pay in cash. We want to make sure that the big credit card companies aren't getting their percentage, and also it makes it harder to track that people are spending money. We're not targeting small businesses or communities. We're targeting the corporate systems that profit from injustice, fuel authoritarianism, and crush worker power. When we ask you to stop scrolling on social media, that doesn't mean stop posting. Here's the graphic that we're using right now. Let me put it in the chat real quick. All right, and I'll continue sharing new ones as they're created, and you can also reshare the graphics that we post on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Reddit. When you post, make sure to use the hashtag Solidarity Warriors as well as mass blackout. Small Business Saturday is exempt from the blackout, and we're encouraging everyone to use that day to invest in community-based ethical alternatives to major corporations, preferably paying in cash. There's already some corporate or media coverage, and we're really excited to be a part of this action. It's supported nationally by groups like 5051, and there are other blackouts happening, but some of them are just targeting specific businesses. What we want to do is essentially something akin to partial general strike, partial economic blackout. So we want to see a huge drop in sales for all corporate businesses. And so that's our goal here. And I think that's about it. That's about all I have for you right now on that. Like I said, Morgan's in the meeting, so we'll have more information for you when I send out that follow-up email, and I can try to answer questions later on once Leah's done. But now I'd like to introduce Leah from the Colorado Rapid Response Network, also known as CORRN, who's going to talk to us about some important information about Know Your Rights. Leah, go ahead.
My name's Lena. I am Lena Patyandi. I am a volunteer with the Colorado Rapid Response Network, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And I am today going to talk about Know Your Rights for Immigrants and Allies. So let's do some screen sharing. See if I can. Okay. Hopefully you can see my slides now. Tiffany's going to interrupt if I go awry.
Yeah.
So yeah, great. So like I said, I am a Denver resident. I've lived here for almost 25 years, and I volunteered with different immigrant rights groups on and off throughout that period. I'm also a nurse. I work with immigrants and poor populations at a safety net clinic. And I was a union organizer in the misty mists of time when I was first out of college. I worked for the Service Employees International Union, and I organized a workforce that was made up primarily of immigrants. I'm lucky to have been able to learn Spanish. And now, like I said, I'm a nurse and I'm a volunteer community organizer, just like you guys. And so this issue of Know Your Rights which we're going to cover both for immigrants and allies, is something that is near and dear to my heart and that I'm really passionate about. All right, so disclaimer, this is not legal advice. I am not a lawyer, and if you have a very specific situation that you have worries or concerns about, then you definitely need to seek a lawyer. This is really know your rights information. I also want to acknowledge that things are changing really rapidly on the ground as relates to immigrants and in situations with ICE. But so far, this advice has held pretty firm in the last 11 months since inauguration, and indeed before then. And as the ACLU says, regardless of changing situations, the best way to keep your rights is to exercise those rights. So this is in that spirit. The sources for this training come from a couple of sources. The big one here in Colorado is the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. They do know your rights trainings as well. And I took a lot of this from their training, and I've been trained as a train the trainer with them. I also expanded the format just a little bit, used Make the Road New York, an immigrant rights organization out of New York, as well as the National Immigration Law Center, which has really excellent information for non-lawyers about immigration. No Kings and their coalition is also doing some really good work that I'm going to talk about a bit later. And then just a quick shout out to Just Seeds, which is an art collective, and that's where I get a lot of the artwork in this training. So I want to pull out just a little bit to kind of a 30,000 foot view. I want to talk a little bit about why immigrant rights. Now, if you're an immigrant, if you love an immigrant, if you're in a family that is people of mixed status, maybe some folks are new immigrants and some folks are have a set status or have citizenship, this is a really obvious question, and you don't need to know the answer to it. You just know the answer to it in your heart. But I want to talk about this a little bit for native born folks, for white folks, for allies, right? And potential allies of immigrants. Why should we care about immigrant rights? So, I think that as pro-democracy activists, we know that the one of the cornerstones of democracy is equality and equal justice before the law, right? And the idea that everyone in our country should have access to the same basic rights. But right now, we live in a country with millions of people who are our neighbors and who don't have a pathway to citizenship or even a way to regularize their status in this country. We live in an economy that asks for the labor of immigrants, but doesn't provide those same people with full human, civil, or labor rights. We live in communities where immigrants bring their whole amazing selves and cultures to live and raise their families with us, but they don't get a chance to vote to defend their own communities because they're denied the vote. Instead, they face being placed into a separate legal system. And we've seen a lot of evidence of that in places like Chicago, right? Places where there are immigration courts that really don't provide the same rights that are provided for in other courts. And an example that I was shocked to learn about years ago was the fact that you don't have a guarantee of representation in the immigration justice system. You can have a lawyer, but you have to pay for it. There's no public defender. You also don't have a right to a super basic democratic principle, which is the right to a speedy trial. So what we've really done is create an inhumane system that's built up over decades, over multiple administrations. And now we have this authoritarian wannabe who comes along. And unfortunately, through our immigration system, many of the tools and mechanisms are already in place to now terrorize immigrants further and expand that out to larger populations, right? It's like the mechanism for the SS has already been put in place over decades. And so I really believe strongly the scale and brutality with which we've seen all of this grow wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't thought that there was this like second-class citizenship or second-class status for a lot of people. And so I think that's something that's very dangerous. And so I think Fannie Lou Hamer, one of the most famous civil rights activists of her generation, is really right when she says that nobody's free until everybody's free. And that connection between immigration and democracy, I'm ashamed to say, I didn't see coming until it was pretty late. So let's get a little bit more concrete, okay? Let's talk a little bit about what is ICE a little more specifically. So ICE, of course, stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's an agency of the Department of Homeland Security, which was actually established in 2003. They haven't been around that long in like bureaucratic terms. They really came about in the aftermath of 9/11. It's important to note that ICE agents are federal. They are not local police. They are not county sheriffs. They are not state highway patrol. They're federal agents tasked with managing immigration matters. They are not tasked with managing criminal matters. By and large, immigration is a civil issue, a question of civil law. It's not a question of criminal law. Of course, it gets complicated at certain points, but that's really important to realize because we have really criminalized immigrants, but a lot of immigration law is civil. So, to highlight this distinction, I want us to know that in Colorado, legally, there's supposed to be no cooperation between ICE and local law enforcement agencies. And there's a logic to that. We want local communities, no matter where somebody in that community is from, we want those people to feel safe reporting crime and building relationships with their neighbors and relationships with their police. So, if you imagine a victim of domestic violence, you don't want her worrying if ICE is going to get called on her or even on her potential abuser, because we know that those relationships are complicated for people. And if you think that's going to happen, you're not going to call. So that's really important to realize the distinction between different kinds of enforcement agencies. ICE should be wearing uniforms and identifying themselves. We know that's less and less true, particularly in militarized cities right now. And you can see on my slide, they might have something that says ICE, but they might not. So you can't count, of course, on them having something that says ICE. They're often in plain clothes. In courts, they often show up in plain clothes. And unfortunately, you probably all know that increasingly they're masked. So, what's going on with ICE this year? In 2025, since the inauguration, one of the first signs that we had that the federal regime would escalate against immigrants and perceived immigrants is a retraction of the sensitive areas standard. So anyone who has kids who go to school, who goes regularly to church, who uses healthcare should know about this. The standard was in place since 2011, and it said there are certain areas that are sensitive, and ICE should not prioritize those or target those for immigration enforcement. And again, they are schools, healthcare facilities, and places of worship. But since then, we know that ICE has tried to enter schools in New York City, in Chicago, and in LA. I know at least of one case where they entered an emergency room in Chicago. I don't know how frequently they're doing that. I don't think super frequently yet, but we don't know what's coming, right? We aren't sure what they're going to target next. But that's really changed and is a big part of how aggressive they are. They're also, of course, continuing to grow. A lot of you as activists might have followed the initial pieces of the reconciliation bill in the summer. We're still dealing with the fallout from that. And a big part of what was passed during that bill was to vastly increase ICE's budget. Their budget to detain people in facilities went up 400%. Their annual budget is projected to be so large that it is going to be bigger than all but 15 of the world's largest militaries. So that preposterous growth in budget, as well as the use of quotas and pressures on ICE workers to say, we want you to bring in X number of people every day or every week or every month, equals a lot of aggressive enforcement on a scale that we really haven't seen before. So let's get even a little more concrete. Let's talk about rights as they apply under the Constitution or as they fall under the Constitution and applied to ICE situations. So that in the context of an ICE presence, of course, we have the First Amendment. We have the right under that amendment to ask and communicate with officials, right? And so we want to ask who the officer is. What's your name? Can I know what agency you're with? Do you have a card with you? What is your badge number? And we also have the right to observe and record actions, and we actually recommend that you do this. In Colorado, you have the right to record sound, and audio of government agents or police. You don't have to have their consent to do that. And so it's completely fine for you to do that. It's of course important for you to not get in the way of their duties. Otherwise, you can be charged with obstruction. I'm going to go through a few amendments and then we're going to talk about some concrete scenarios, okay? So I'm kind of going from big down into more narrow. So if you have questions, hang in there. The scenarios might answer some of those, and then they might open up some questions too. So let's look at the Fourth Amendment, okay? The Fourth Amendment protects us against unlawful search and seizure without probable cause. And the primary way this is done is through warrants. And that's actually in the Constitution, the use of legitimate warrants. When we think about the Fourth Amendment, it's important to realize that ICE will often detain people without a true warrant. They'll use something called an administrative warrant that's signed by a bureaucrat, frankly, not by a judge. And they will use that to gain access to an area, to confuse people, to say that they have a warrant. And then they'll do collateral arrests, which means they'll work to detain anyone they think might be undocumented or anyone they feel like they want to detain after they've kind of gotten their foot in the door. So let's see if through all my clicking, I want to share the warrants piece here. All right, clicking. I'm going to try to find chat. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and send this in chat. I have two screens tonight, guys, and it feels very glamorous, but I also have a few too many screens, a few too many tabs. Okay, so you can see this up close, okay? And then I'm still sharing, so you guys should be able to see my view, but I know like I often tune in on a phone, so I've put a link in as well if you want to see a kind of a better view of a true warrant and a judicial warrant, okay? So let's talk about this. A judicial warrant has the date of the actual day you're living in, the current date. It has a judge's signature. It has a specific address where the search or the seizure is expected to happen. And it has a specific person if it's not just a search of a premises, right? It has also the specific person they're looking for. It might have names, it might have what's the word, aliases. I always say that word wrong. Like nicknames, and it might have a description of the person, right? So the thing you want to look for is that judge's signature. That's a true judicial warrant where there are pretty severe consequences if you don't follow it. In contrast, what ICE uses is something that is not a warrant. It is, they call it a warrant though. So if you open either the link or if you can see on my shared screen, at the top, it says warrant for arrest of alien. So this is not a true warrant. It has a signature by an authorized immigration officer, and there's often not a specific location or person, and the date might not even be correct. So it looks very official. It's very scary when someone tells you they have a warrant, but it is incredibly common for ICE to present with these false warrants. So it's really important to be aware of whether you're an immigrant or an ally. All right, let's talk about another right we have. Under the Fifth Amendment, we have the right to avoid self-incrimination and remain silent when questioned by a law officer, an agent, or an enforcement officer. And I think of a hand with 5 fingers covering your mouth for your Fifth Amendment rights, right? So you do not have to talk to ICE officers. If someone asks your name, you can say, I am exercising my right to remain silent. There is an important detail I want you guys to know about this, that difference between state law officers or local law officers and ICE. So in Colorado, there is a state law that if a police officer asks for your name and date of birth, you are supposed to provide that much information to them. After that, you can go ahead and take the Fifth. With ICE, you don't even have to give your name, date of birth, or any information. So this varies a little bit by state. Here in Colorado, you are supposed to give your name and if they ask your date of birth. Okay, so a little bit of a distinction there. With ICE, you can go straight to, I am exercising my right to remain silent. And indeed, you can say, I want to talk to a lawyer, right? And really, I encourage people to work on these phrases because they're hard to say in the face of somebody with a lot of authority who's standing in front of you. Okay, the Sixth Amendment. All people have these rights, right? The right to due process of the accused, the right to knowing what you're being accused of. And that's sort of a basic fundament of democracy, that we need some transparency for our officers and that people aren't just disappeared, right? So again, going back to asking the agent's name, what agency are you with? And if you are the target, saying, have I done something wrong? Am I being charged with something? Am I free to go? And if it's clear that you aren't and you're being detained, why am I being detained, right? So we have the right to ask these questions back to officers. If you're somebody who is watching and is an observer ally, you might want to say, has this person done wrong? What is this person being charged with? Why is this person being detained? Or if it hasn't escalated that far, you could simply say, is this person free to go? The 14th Amendment is my favorite amendment. Everyone's got a favorite, right? This is after the Civil War, and we decided that people are people, they are not property. And so we have these equal protection rights, right? Part of what this amendment says is, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. And it doesn't say any citizen, it doesn't say any white person, it says any person. And so for a long time now, activists have been fighting for the promise of the 14th Amendment. Of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I would argue, is an expansion upon this 14th Amendment promise. And I think we have a lot of work to do for immigrants to be getting part of that promise met for them as well. So remember, equal protection. This is one of the things that we're fighting for. Okay, I want to go again. We're going to get more concrete. Let's talk about a couple of scenarios, okay? There's a lot of us on this call. So what I want to try to do is want you to, if you have access to the chat, I want you to feel free to type in the chat. If you just have yourself muted and you're just going to think out loud, I want you to kind of think out loud as I present the scenario, like what would I do in this situation? And then I'm going to give some suggestions after we present the scenario. Okay, because I know I think we've got like 90 plus people on this call. It's hard to be very interactive, but I'm going to give us a little bit of space to pause because I want you to kind of think about what you would do in this scenario. Okay, so you're driving to work and you get pulled over to get gas. You're outside your car when two men in plain clothes call your name and they start to approach you. These people are immigration agents, likely immigration agents. You might not know 100% if they're in plain clothes, and they've been following you. So what do you do? They call out your name. What do you do? I want to give you a second to think about what would happen in this scenario. And particularly if I'm the agent and I say, hey, Lena Patyandi, hey, are you Lena? Right? Our natural inclination is to turn around and say, that's me, what? Right? And so we want to be careful there, right? Hi, who are you? Is that your name? What is your name? So what are we going to say? Where are you going? Are you heading to work? Are you authorized to work? Right? I like this. Ignore, finish, and get in the car. Put the car between you and the people. Very smart. That sounds like an answer that a woman might put down, right? Because we're always having to think about how safe our surroundings are. Not only women, but often women. Why are you harassing me? Pull out my phone and start to record. Someone else said, who are you? What do you want? Treat them as if they're rapists. You have to be very careful, right? So I love these answers. So a couple of things. You don't, with law enforcement or any kind of agent of the state, you do not want to give them any ammunition You don't want to answer their questions. And so a really good strategy is to throw their questions back at them. So I love some of these answers. So you remember, we're using our right to remain silent, a right to ask questions. So instead of answering, what about saying, I'm sorry, who are you? I'm sorry, are you with a certain agency? What do you care? Right? So asking some of those questions back instead of answering is an excellent strategy. Can I know why you want to know this? Right? And then what if it progresses? Well, we're with ICE and we need to know if you're here legally. I'm sorry, have I been doing anything wrong? What makes you want to talk to me? What's happening, right? But don't answer their questions, and to say something along the lines of, am I free to go now? Right? Sometimes they're trying to go for the real low hanging fruit, and if you don't answer and give them some rope to hang you with, then you would be able to go. None of this is a guarantee, but you don't want to give them any of that information. One thing that's really important, what if they're really direct? Are you a citizen? Right? Under no circumstances should you lie. Often people get in trouble in legal settings, not because of what is the fact of the matter, but because they have gotten very nervous and they have lied. So no lying, just not answering. And that's a big distinction, right? If you have documents on you, there's some legal advice out there from good sources that folks who are immigrants should have some proof that they've been here for a certain amount of time. I don't want to get too far into that, other than to say it is best practice to show documents that are from the United States, not from other countries. If they see documents from other countries, that's for them, that's adding fuel to the fire that you are not from the United States. Okay. Again, you do not have to provide your name to anybody. Okay. All right, let's do another one. All right, scenario 2. Now this one's in your home, okay? You're at home hosting a party for friends and family. They're suddenly pounding on the door. Outside are 2 ICE agents who say that they're searching for Lupe Garcia and you must open immediately. What do you do? And we have unfortunately seen that here in the Denver area. We've seen it in Colorado. We've seen it in lots of places where people have tried going into homes. So take a little time to think about that. I have to say, as a white native born woman, I have not had something scary like this happen before. And so it's really important to do a little bit of time thinking about this. I'm seeing don't open the door. Do you have a warrant? And here's what happens sometimes too, right? This is the police. We're looking for Lupe. We're looking for Lupe Garcia. Is he there? I need you to open this door so we can talk. Right? That's very scary and it's very authoritative. And I have to say, I was sort of raised up that you follow authorities. And so we have to think ahead of time about, like, what do we do when this happens, or what do we do when this happens to our friends, right? All right, I'm liking the warrant. All right, what if it's a big party and you were in the back and you were in the kitchen and someone opens the door? What can you do once ICE has gotten into your house? I think the right initial answer is do not open the door. What if they do open the door? Any thoughts about what you can do, what you can still do to minimize harm? I'm going to call my lawyer. I like trespassing. So you could say, I do not consent to you being in here. This is my house. I don't consent to you being here. It's going to be hard to get them out once the door has opened. Well, I just need to look around for Lupe Garcia. It's good that I'm here because we're going to just be able to talk now, nice and calm like, right? So what do you say then? I don't consent to that. So I think being very verbal about your lack of consent is really important. Let's go back and say that nobody has opened the door and they claim they have a warrant. What do you do if ICE tells you, oh, I've got a warrant? You need to let me in. This is a warrant for Lupe Garcia. What if there's a Lupe Garcia in the house? All this is going to really raise your anxiety level, right? There's a warrant for your brother-in-law in the house. I like it. Let's see it. So this is where we have to be smart, and we are training immigrant communities that they need to slide the warrant under the door. That is not an excuse for us to open the door. If that's not possible because of like whatever, however your door's built, they can put it against a window so that you can see it, right? And then you're looking for that judicial signature. You're looking to see if it's a true warrant. In most cases, they will not have a warrant. In some cases, people are going to houses because there is a warrant. There might be a warrant. If there is what we think is a true warrant, another way you can limit damage for people, limit sort of like ICE expanding into collateral arrests, is you send Lupe Garcia out the door on his own. You don't let ICE in. You send the person who has the true warrant, for whom there is a true warrant, you send them out. And I think recording is always the right answer. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I just want to be able to us to handle in that there is a world in which there could be a true warrant. If you disobey a true warrant, you're in trouble with like the full extent of the judicial system. And that's a lot more weighty than you see that there is sort of this piece of paper from an ICE bureaucrat. You have no obligation to pay any attention to that. Okay. All right, so the single first thing is don't answer. And I want to give you guys a really fun example from this that I think people in Colorado are really proud of. There was a group of apartments near Leetsdale and I think kind of heading into Aurora, where called the Cedar Run Apartments. There was a really big raid attempted in March on these apartments. And people there had Know Your Rights trainings. It was a community with lots of immigrants in it, lots of people of color, lots of folks from all over the world and all over the United States. And they had actually had some training in Know Your Rights. And the vast majority of folks just refused to answer the door. And they showed up with paddy wagons and they left with empty paddy wagons. They got a few people who had stepped out of their house because they were trying to get to work or whatever. And they really took advantage of people who had left their premises. But people who stayed in their house because they did not have any true warrants and who had known about this were really protected. And so this is a strategy that can work and is really important for you to be aware of if you are a person of color, someone who could be taken for an immigrant or who is an immigrant, right? So let's see if I've already covered that. So takeaways, right? You only have to open the door for an arrest warrant or a search warrant. Again, a true judicial warrant. It has to have their name, the address, today's date, the signature of a judge, right? If they have that true warrant, limit your damage, have that person talk to them, make sure you have some conversation with them because you're going to have to figure out where they're going and how they're safe, but you also have them step out. You don't have ICE come in. Okay. Okay, scenario 3. This is more of an ally bystander one. So you're on the way to school and you are picking up kids and you see 2 cars and a handful of ICE agents who have blocked off a truck. Maybe it's just a pickup truck. There's some people in the truck. What do you do? What would you do if you saw this happening? Got lots of recording. Good job, people. Love it. Love it. Film from a distance. What are they doing wrong? Call 911. Okay, great. So I'm glad that people are thinking this through, right? So the first thing is, I think the very first thing you've already skipped over, so many of you, is like, you stopped. Good job. Way to be an ally, right? You stopped to make sure that there's no abuse of power, that things are recorded, and that as much as is in your control, which I know is not always as much as we want, people are in our communities are being taken care of because we see abuses of power every day from ICE. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, am I able to stop? Am I the kind of person who will stop? And am I safe to stop? Right? So I want people to think a little bit about their risk. So here I am. I'm a pretty, I like to say, I'm a pasty faced white girl. It's pretty clear. I'm also like a middle class mom. I'm like in the demographic that police are the least scared of on the planet. Right. And so for me, it's very safe for me to stop and be a good ally and make sure that things are okay for that person. And if they aren't, at least have there be a witness, right, for transparency. For I have some friends who are Latina, and they might feel like for me to stop is much more dangerous. And so you do have to be smart and do like your own risk assessment, right? It's really important. I'm not telling everyone that they're safe stopping. So I want people to realize that. And I want those of us who are safer stopping to really realize that, okay? It's important for us to kind of own that privilege. But let's say we're sort of native born white folks and we feel pretty safe. I think stopping is a really great thing to do. Is there anything else we could do besides recording? Any other thoughts? Let's see what we've got. One here. Pull over, get out, start videoing, get as close as possible. Ask what the person has done wrong, what their name is, who they want to notify, try to get a phone number. Yeah, so I think we want to ask, and we want to ask the agent or an agent with them, what agency are you with? What's going on here? Can I get a business card? What kind of business is this, right? And then if you're able to communicate with the other person, you can do that as well. Sometimes they work really hard not to allow it. Right, so here's a couple of magic phrases that are really good for allies and bystanders, right? Um, Sometimes they'll get very angry. They'll tell you to stop recording and they might approach you. And this is where you keep recording, but you make sure your voice and that your view in your camera is showing that you're not interfering. I'm not interfering. I'm just trying to learn if ICE is here, or I'm not interfering. I'm going to record. I have the right to record, right? We're back to the broken record. Who are you? What agency are you with? I need a badge number. Do you have a business card? Um, let's see, what is the purpose of this operation? Do you have a warrant for this person? Can I see the warrant? Why is this person being detained? Why are you taking them? Where are you taking them? Right? So asking questions is a really important skill. And it can also be a little bit less escalatory because it's still dangerous for everyone to escalate with enforcement. So we want to make sure that we are asking questions that's a little bit less aggressive than, I can't believe you're here. Fuck you, get rid of this. You need to stop harassing this guy and arresting him, right? That's escalating with everyone. But questions show you're the reasonable party because you might need to use this recording later on, right? So again, assess your risk. I really encourage upstanders, allies, white folks, frankly, to stop if they're able to. You have the right to observe and record. Make sure you're not interfering with somebody's process. You have the right to ask what the charges are. You have the right to ask for the agency and the officer's name and get their card. And then this has been brought up, you should call CORRN, right? So some people might feel like, I hate to say this, I am going to be fired if I'm late to work today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call CORRN on the way. I've got the intersection, I've got a little bit of information, and I'm going to let folks know, right? And so there's different levels of this. You could call CORRN and you could stay and record if you feel like you're able to and you've done your risk assessment and you have some time. So this leads me to, what is CORRN? Any thumbs up for folks who know already what the Colorado Rapid Response Network is? I bet a lot of you know about this. I see at least one thumbs up. Yay. So I'm going to kind of go over that just to remind folks, if you don't already have this in your cell phone, this is a great time. Pull out your cell phone, put this phone number in your cell phone. It is for any and everyone in Colorado to use. It's a statewide network, and I'm going to explain to you how it works. So it's an ICE activity hotline. You dial the number and you're going to choose option 1. There's a couple of options, but the most common option is 1 for you're wondering if there is an active ICE raid or active ICE presence somewhere. It's going to ring a few times because it's going through a system to ring to me or another volunteer, because this is what I volunteer for. We have volunteers on duty 24/7. We have to be bilingual to be dispatchers, so English and Spanish. And the dispatcher is going to answer and say, this is the Rapid Response Network. Are you experiencing a raid? What do you need help with? And you're going to say, I was driving my kids to work at this intersection. I'm pretty sure I saw ICE, or I'm not sure it was ICE, but it looked suspicious. And it happened about 5 minutes ago. And can you send people to see what's going on? I really had to leave. I've got an infant, or I was going to get fired, or whatever, or I'm still here, but I don't like being here alone, right? So you're going to call, you're going to give the information you have. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send out a call for confirmers. So rapid response confirmers that live or work in the area will then respond and try to go to this site. And it just depends a lot on the time of day, and what part of the state it's in for how quickly we can send people. We're always looking to recruit new confirmers, but the confirmers then go, they talk to their people who have done the risk assessment, have done some training, and they are ready to go and talk to law enforcement. They go talk to the agents, they observe, they inform people of their rights if they're able to, right? And they also deal with transparency and making sure that that agents know that there is someone here watching what they're doing, because we know that police officers behave differently when they're being watched. We all behave differently when we're being watched, right? And so this is a key mechanism for transparency. Let's see. Oh, I thought I had one more thing for ICE. Oh, I for CORRN. I must not. So think if you have questions for CORRN. I'm almost done. I have one other scenario I want to talk about, and then let's see what kinds of questions we have that come up. Okay. But this is a fabulous network, and I really, really encourage you. You don't have to have any training to dial this and be a good Samaritan and like let somebody know about concerns you have. And we go to a lot of places where it turns out that it was local police, or it was the DEA, or it was something else. But we go for people who are afraid to find out what it is. Okay. All right. Scenario 4. Just check in the chat. I'm going to leave some of the more in-depth questions for a bit later, okay? And maybe Tiffany can help me sort through if I'm missing big questions in a little bit. Okay, scenario 4. So your work site. Let's think a little bit about our work sites. So depending very much on your work, we need to think about if we have a policy for if ICE comes to our work. A couple of thoughts about this. ICE primarily, and sort of the predecessors to ICE, used to primarily pull workers from work sites, right? And in fact, when I was a union organizer, it was often bosses who would call ICE or, again, migration officers, because if someone was organizing and they didn't like those folks, they would just call and have ICE come and remove workers, right? And so I think we have to be a little bit careful about who is involved in this conversation. The pattern has changed. They're not going to work sites as much. They're doing a lot of these kind of random stop and grabs in places that are militarized, at least, but they still are, pulling people from landscaping companies. They're going to farms. They're going to a lot of work sites. I think it's important, depending on where you work, to think about that there's a different interest of the workers and there's a slightly different interest of the managers and bosses. But in many cases, these guys can ally and work together, right? So ask yourself at your job, do you have a policy of what to do if ICE shows up? Are your coworkers trained or kind of have a plan to protect themselves or others? And are your managers or leaders trained? And I'm just going to give you a really quick example. So I work at a clinic. Now that sensitive areas has been pulled, we have an ICE policy, but I have really taken it on myself to make sure everyone in the clinic knows the policy, because a policy is only as good as people are trained in it. We have, because we're a clinic, we have a big forward-facing public waiting room. We also have private areas, and that's going to be important. So The other thing that's really important are some best practices. Again, we're back to the broken record. When someone shows up at your workplace, if you're the first person to run into them, hi, can I help you? Who are you? What agency are you with? Oh, can I get a badge number? Do you carry a business card? These are very normal things to ask someone. But businesses also have the right to deny access, and they specifically have the right to deny access in private areas that have been labeled like employees only or private do not enter. And we're really encouraging places to make sure they have very clear signs up that show that there's a difference between, say, a public area in a restaurant and an area back where the kitchen is or back where the employees take breaks, because ICE has to get consent to go to those areas, kind of similar to getting into your house. So it's really important to have signs placed up for this. One thing, in fact, that I want to give a plug out to and a shout out to is that the national, where did I put it? Maybe I didn't put it where I thought I put it. I'll just go back to this little guy because I love this graphic. So the National No Kings Coalition, and Indivisible is a really big part of this, is doing a program called Signs of Solidarity. I don't know if anyone here volunteers with Signs of Solidarity or has at least heard of it. This is a national program. It's very easy to implement if you're interested. The idea is to go to businesses and ask them to place public facing signs that say immigrants are welcome here, to make for a welcoming community, and then to make sure also that they're protected by having things like the private areas signs, and that they're thinking a little bit about how to have a plan if ICE should come into their neighborhood. Signs of Solidarity, I might have.
I can drop the links to their upcoming training.
Yeah, if Tiffany wants to drop a link, they have really great information. And what I love about this project is it's a great thing to do if you're newer to activism, because like you can pick your favorite coffee shop, read through this information, print out a couple signs and say, hey, would you be up to posting these? This is a great way to be in solidarity. And you can go to people that you know or small businesses that you already know and support, and you're part of this larger campaign of visibility of fighting back against the Trump regime, and of saying to the immigrants in our community that we are with you. We are all together, right? There's no immigrant and other, there's just us. And I think that this is really great. You can do it as a group, you can do it as an individual, because it's being run by Indivisible. So it's a really good program. But do a little bit of thinking. Some people are going to work in work sites that have a bigger issue around this than others. It depends a lot on what kind of work that you do, okay? Here we go, other resources. So this is Know Your Rights wallet cards. Some versions of these are like red wallet cards that are from the national, some national organizations. They basically help remind you of scripting around like what to say if you are stopped. This is the wallet card that is specific to Colorado because it has the CORRN, the Rapid Response Network phone number on it. And this one I do have a link ready to go. That's the link for if you're interested in like ordering some for printing. And so these are really great to have, like maybe in your glove compartment, or if you have like friends and family you work with and you want to hand them out to some people, or a bigger activist group, wherever you, whatever you're a part of. So these are really great to have as well. Something a little bit more concrete. So guys, I'm kind of winding up, and then I want to ask questions, but I do want to say, I know this is really kind of heavy stuff. Some of these scenarios might have opened up a lot of questions as well. I don't have all the answers. I think interacting with any kind of enforcement, especially in this day and age where there are very few checks and balances right now, is really scary. This is hard stuff. This is really heavy stuff. But I want to end on a bit of a powerful note, which is that I've been honored to be in and out of the immigrant rights community in Colorado since about 2001. And there is a lot that we can do, right? So there are things in place now that we might take for granted that these guys have fought for years, right? We have access to people who've been in the state for a certain amount of time for driver's licenses, which we know are absolutely necessary for people to get to work, right? And to get to work safely. And that's not true in all states. We have access right now. I'm a nurse. I have folks who don't have full documentation. If they are pregnant, they have access to prenatal care, which they wouldn't have had, but that was passed at the state level through a coalition that included many immigrant rights organizations. The fact that local law enforcement does not hold people in county jail for many extra days until an ICE officer shows up to pick them up. We don't allow that in Colorado anymore. That's illegal in Colorado. That is something that was stopped by immigrant rights activists. And so the more that we stick together, the more we are going to be able to fight back this regime. It's the only power we got, right? The power of numbers. And we just have to remember that scapegoating is not going to work for us. And we are all together in all of this, whether we're immigrants, we're mixed family, or we're native born, we're going to be able to stand in solidarity together. And that's really what's going to do this for us, right? You guys are welcome to reach out to me. This is my personal email and cell if you have any questions. There's a lot I don't know. Again, I will reinforce that I am not an attorney. I do not have a legal background, but this is really good stuff that we have been sharing across the nation, across many states. And if you have other groups that are interested in this, you're welcome to reach out to me as well. And I would love to see if there are any questions that we think we should dive into. I might stop sharing.
Lena, I have a list of questions that came up while you were talking, and I'm
Okay.
so sorry I called you Leah earlier.
Oh, that's okay.
All right. The first one is, do you have a source that explains the legal power of an administrative warrant? Or maybe not a source, but does an administrative warrant carry any legal power?
Yeah, so the trainings that I have taken all say no to this. I would say that if you want to dive a little deeper into like what that is for, I think it's a bureaucratic tool used by agents when they go out so that they have something to kind of wave around when they're looking for people. Um, but you can go to, I always get this name wrong, so let me tell you guys, right? It's one of the ones that I cited. It's the National Immigration Law Center. So they're www.nilc, just for their initials, right? National Immigration Law Center. They have a bunch of like very digestible bullet point kind of briefs. Like some of them are 1 page, some of them are 5 pages, but pretty short. And they have one about warrants. They have one about like lots of different things. They have like a position paper about what to do in healthcare clinics, right? So they're a really good resource for a lot of us activists who are not lawyers. So that's where I would point you.
And the next one is, are any legal entities working to rein in ICE? I said I know there are lots that are suing the administration, but are there other legal entities that are working on that? I know like state legislators don't have any control over it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there are a lot of lawsuits. I think I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves, right? We have a Roberts court, no longer supreme in my book, court in the land that is often not going to side with us. But we do have different levels of judiciary that are not completely bought out. So there is a big piece of it that's legal. I think it's mostly law, legal organizations, but I think who is also going to rein in ICE at the end of the day when this fight between authoritarianism and democracy is done is, I know this sounds so pie in the sky, guys, but it's people, right? We have to rewrite the legislation once we get rid of an authoritarian government, or as part of getting rid of the authoritarian government, to say we don't have different classes of people and we don't have a gulag system ready to go in this country. And so I think ultimately we've got to do a lot around like legislation that's going to change this.
All
That's a
right,
very
and
non-specific answer. Sorry.
that's okay. And I don't know if you know about this or if it's not related. Someone asked, does anyone have experience with CNVC, the Center for Nonviolent Communications?
Ooh. I think I've heard of them, but I don't know a
Okay.
lot about them.
Yeah, me neither. All right. How do we defend an immigrant who's being harassed and they don't speak English?
So I think one thing to do is that recording. I think another thing is that just by your presence, we also do a lot of accompaniment. By we, I mean I work a lot with the Coloradans for Immigrant Rights group, and we do a lot of court accompaniment. And so sometimes it doesn't matter if you're talking with, you can't be their lawyer anyway. You don't need to know that level of detail. Sometimes it's just okay that you're there to support them. But if they're being taken anyway and they want to share information with you for contacting, that's okay. On the other hand, keep in mind that there's all these people standing around. They might not want to share because we've just told them that their right is to not talk to people. So I would not overthink that if you can't communicate, it's bad. I would just think that like your presence and your witness, because it's such tough times right now, that might be what you have to offer, right? There might be some more specifics in that question. I'm happy to answer that too.
I didn't put down the name of who asked each question. So if that was you and you had some follow-up questions, just throw those in the chat. The next one was who should we send those recordings to?
Yeah, so I would call the Rapid Response Network. So the Rapid Response Network will also take information after the fact. We also have things like resources for if people do want to seek legal counsel, if they and their loved ones need help with some information, if at any point it's going to be used in court. So I would send recordings to us. One thing that I think was posted that I would caution against is posting it on social media. Part of the
Yeah.
reason for that is that it is really hard until we get confirmation of for sure is it ICE, and posting people's faces without their consent on social media is actually really puts them in actually kind of a dangerous situation. And we
Hmm.
don't want to be like constantly posting victim photos. And so instead of social media, I would use the experience of activists and of like experienced staff members, because we do on CORRN post on Facebook whether we've confirmed or not confirmed for people so that the community can stay educated, but we don't post people's faces of victims or potential victims. And so I would be careful, because what happens a lot of times is people just start filming, they do it real quick to social media on Facebook, and then everyone is terrified, and we're causing like a constant cycle of like traumatizing people when things really haven't been confirmed yet. So this is my bias because I also volunteer for CORRN, but I really like the idea that we're kind of going through a centralized place to figure out what has been confirmed and what isn't.
I think I'm still an intern, but I believe that it can also complicate things if that footage needs to be
Mm.
used in court.
Okay, and that's very possible. That you probably know more about that than I do, Tiffany.
I think so, but don't hold me to that. The next question was, should you call CORRN before you start recording?
Yeah, I think it's up to you what process you need to do is like how intense have things gotten, that kind of thing. Sometimes there's more than one person and one person records and the other person calls CORRN. It is going to take a little while for us to like get the information. We send out a text message to people in the area. They say they can go and then they go. So you don't want to take too long to call CORRN. And I'd rather you err on the side of calling CORRN and then going, oh, just kidding. We figured out it's the local police, than not. But I think that just depends a lot on how things are rolling at the moment.
Okay. And someone just asked, workers are also asking how to find their loved ones who've been kidnapped and have vanished. So I just put the information for the attorney I work for, Jose. He's amazing. He will talk to you, and, without charging you anything, or talk to families about their loved ones' immigration cases. And he's also great at trying to locate them.
And the other thing I would say is there is a system. Once you're in the system, you are, and actually it's often before, you have something called an A number, and that stands for, kind of disgustingly, alien number, right?
Mm-hmm.
For humanizing language, we don't call people aliens, and we sure don't call people illegals. We call people immigrants, or people who are immigrants, right? But the A number stands for aliens, and so there is a way to look up people who have been registered into the system. That often can have a delay of some time, and that's when family members are often very, very stressed. But if somebody is unable to find their person, they can also call CORRN, because, and a part I didn't focus on as much is that there is an option to talk to somebody because things are rolling right now and I'm worried about ICE right now. But there's also an option for something called the docu team, and that's people who will talk to you about a case that has already happened, and they can provide you some resources, and they can help you try to find your loved one as well. So you can
Very
actually
cool.
use CORN as like a clearinghouse if you're not sure where to go. And even if we're ultimately not the best person, we have like lists of resources for you.
We had several people ask, like, how do I find out if there's an agency like CORRN in my state? Can people from out of state call you with questions like how to find their loved ones and things like that?
Yeah, so usually I think we get a handful of out of state calls. So the A number system is national. Um, I would say, though, that for folks who are from other states, what you want to do is find out who is your main immigrant rights group in your state or in your larger metropolitan area. I would guess that every state has an immigrant rights, either a coalition or just at least one organization that does a lot of this. And they're going to find you information that's more useful than, like, say, someone from Iowa calling into Colorado.
And if you were searching for that on Google or social media, what would you search for
For like an immigrant rights group,
in your state? Yeah.
I I would probably just use those. I mean, I'm going to be really honest. Like, I found Make the Road New York because I was looking for other modalities for how to do Know Your Rights trainings, and I found them, and it was just really clear, really quickly that they were like one of the preeminent. Like, they have a big staff, they have Know Your Rights stuff. I would just Google immigrant rights groups or immigrant support group and put your state in. I know
Okay.
that's very vague, but I think because this has been an issue where people don't have a good path to citizenship and have lacked rights really since about the mid 80s, since the last time amnesty was passed. Most states are going to have something.
Okay, great. Sean just posted a link in the chat to a site that looks like it has a directory of rapid response networks by state.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Fabulous. Thank you, Sean.
Sean is our internet sleuth and our
That's
social
amazing.
media Reddit guru.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and then Tian is our Instagram and Facebook guru. All right, so when we were going through the scenarios, and you were talking about ICE being at the door asking for someone by name, if they do uh have a warrant and they ask for someone with a common name, can you ask them for other information about that person, like their date of birth or anything like that? Or do you just ask them to hold the warrant up to the window or put it under the door?
Ooh, I haven't gotten that question before. I mean, I would say that you need to know that there is a pretty significant risk if you have a warrant signed by a judge, today's date, the address you're at, and the person's name on it. The chances that they're looking for a different Jose Garcia who also lives at that address, right? And all of those things are pretty low. And I would argue that by that point, so for example, sometimes warrants happen when people have an order of deportation, like a very specific order that they have kind of gone through all the hoops but been caught in the system too many times, and now they are specifically ordered for deportation. Things like that, they're going to know, like they know who I am. They're trying to, so even if you have a false warrant, my recommendation to that person would be you need to talk to your lawyer because they're going to come back. But if they have a true warrant and it has your name and all the other details, there's a pretty big risk in you not turning yourself in and opening the door. That's what I would say. Beyond that, you need to talk to a lawyer because I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to keep saying that, don't we? All right. If you see agents block off a truck, like the scenario you had, someone asked if you're a white parent, what would you leverage CORRN energy and make a scene so other people know something is wrong?
I think that's going to be something we have to talk about more and more if we become militarized like Chicago. I'm sure you guys have seen some of those videos where people are going pretty nutty on the ICE officers. I I think that's part of your risk assessment, right? I am going to be a lot more aggressive than my friend Mercedes is going to be, right? And so I think you have to know your risks, right? Like, are you going to get close enough and in the face enough of an officer that you might be a collateral arrest for obstructing? Are you ready to do that today? Do you have a 3-month-old in your back seat? Maybe you shouldn't do it today. So I think you just have to know what your risk assessment is. CORRN energy in the sense of like, hey guys, like what's going on? I don't understand. Why would you possibly need to like hold this person? Like I think that's great. I think you should go for it. Like, man, we've been in an unfair system a long time. Let's use some white privilege for some other people for a little while. I love it.
Oh yeah. All right. Does CORRN work with RTD security? I have not seen any raids on buses or at light rail stops, but the transit system might be a vulnerable place for stuff like this.
Mhm.
This was from our volunteer coordinator, Katie, who said she rides the RTD every day.
Yeah, I have not, again, I don't get all of our metadata or anything like that, but I have not heard of raids or people going on to the bus system or public transit. Um, that's a good question. I don't know to what extent different security groups know about CORRN or are willing to call CORRN. I don't have an answer to that, but it's a great idea that I'm going to think about the next time I talk to the people who help run it.
Nice. All right. What are the legal rights of businesses to restrict access to a business? There are managers and workers who may be supportive of immigrants, but are controlled by business owners who may not, such as the situation with Home Depot, where the corporate CEOs are silent but benefit from the labor of day workers.
Yeah, and is the question kind of like what can workers who aren't managers
I
or
think it's kind of a two-part question. I guess to elaborate on the part of the training where you were going over, like restricting access to certain areas. Like if they have a judicial warrant, obviously that person is supposed to come out, right? But can they like go into can ICE go into those restricted areas?
here's how we've been training at my clinic. So my clinic has a public waiting area and it has locked doors to go back and to see patients. And what we have trained everyone is that you absolutely don't let ICE back through those. Like you don't go walk in and let them follow behind you. You make sure that you say to them, please wait here, right? And that you're doing everything you reasonably can to not let them in, right? Because if you open that door and they stick their foot in, um, who's going to win in court? I don't know, right? So like anytime you're kind of opening up access, they're going to claim you gave consent. So I think the first thing is having these signs that say private is going to be very clear. And then I think the second thing is like make sure you're not having somebody go walk through that door and ICE is following you in. Make sure people are, when they're so nervous to have ICE around, that they aren't kind of like ICE is like, well, I'll just go follow in with you and make it easier on you, right? And you're like, oh, I don't know, okay, right? So I think like basic like coworker solidarity can be like, we don't let those people back and we say you're not allowed back here. I have to go get a manager, right? Basic like stalling and de-escalating to be like, oh, someone who's not me is gonna have to talk to you. I guess you have to wait here in public. Oh no, I'm not allowed to let anybody else back here. This says private. What can I do? Right? I think that's a really good safe place for most workers to be. And I don't know if that kind of answers part of that question.
All right. And is there a national website with business know your rights info? I found like an indivisible sign up for canvassing for signs of solidarity, but I didn't find a site that has like anything you could download to print out and give to businesses or something like that.
Yeah, I actually think so. Let me share this. Tell me if this is the same or different for this person. This is actually the direct link to the Know Your Rights like full Google document through No Kings. And at the bottom of it, just go to the very last page. There's like information for private businesses in that. And I think that has more specific information, which I'm not as familiar with because I haven't done as much with signs of solidarity.
Okay, I will look for that
Yeah,
and
look on
send
the
it
last
out
page
in
because
an
there's like
email.
additional resources.
Okay. Let me make a note of that. Um, yeah, guys, somebody just made some really rude comments in the chat, so I kicked them out, so don't worry about that. Um, all right. And ICE versus Customs and Border Patrol. Have you seen Customs and Border Patrol? They said I've heard CBP is taking over ICE, and I can say I know that Trump fired a lot of managers in ICE and is replacing them with CBP because apparently ICE wasn't already evil enough.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too, Tiffany, that they've done some replacement recently and we're kind of waiting to see what that looks like. But that Patrol is known for being more aggressive. So the more people we can get trained up to be confirmers and just have this basic information, the better. I think whatever we can do to be ready for if and when we get more militarized, the
Mhm.
better. But I don't know anything more than what you know.
I can tell you I personally saw them after the vigil at Geo. So as it was just Lindy Morgan and I, we finished packing everything up and everyone else was gone. And as the three of us pulled out, an ICE vehicle drove by with the sirens and lights on, just to mess with us. And then, because he turned them off as soon as he turned the corner. And then a CBP vehicle actually followed me all the way to I-70.
Oh
So
my gosh. Yeah.
I had a moment where I was scared and I was like, well, this is what so many people feel like all day, every day.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that happened. And
Gosh.
then someone asked, why can't we get more videos of the detention centers, like
Oh,
from
of like what's
inside?
happening inside. I think the
Hmm.
detention centers are a lot. I mean, I actually have started trying really hard to call them prisons. I think they're
Mm.
prisons for people, um, and often for people who have not done anything wrong. And so I think that I don't have a lot of information of that. I have volunteered with Casa de Paz in the past, and I think it's to scare you and to make sure you know every minute that you're in there that you don't have the same rights as a free person. I mean, that's my psychological non-legal answer.
Yeah, exactly. We're part of the no concentration camps in Colorado group, so that's another name for them. And yeah, I mean, they essentially have the same rules as prisons, so people inside can't have cell phones. I think, if I remember right, a while back, someone was able to sneak a video on a cell phone out a few months ago. And then, of course, they're not letting House representatives in who have the legal right to inspect them. So, and I'm sure if they did, they wouldn't let them take video. They're delaying those visits. They're making representatives schedule those visits so that they can clean things up first.
Mhm.
All
Absolutely.
right. So that's the end of the list of questions I have. If anyone else has other questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat.
Well, I just want to say, while we're waiting to see if there's last minute questions, thank you so much for your guys' time. This is really, really important for us to be sharing this information. Jenny, did you have a
Jenny?
question? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one. I had no idea that I could ask if somebody is being stopped or it seems like they're being detained. I had no idea that I could ask for that I could just walk up and ask, who are you? What are you doing? Can you show me a warrant? Because I guess I would think that they would tell me it's none of my business, but I can do that.
Absolutely. You can say, I'm a citizen. It's my business what the police do. It's always my business. But more importantly, I just wouldn't get into an argument with them. I would just say, I have a right to be here. I'm not obstructing. Can you tell me what you're doing? And I'll tell you a story to back this up because I think it's like, for me, it's like, even though I worked with labor unions years ago, I like haven't done it for so long, right? And I had to kind of build up my courage at that point. And so I've been like rebuilding my courage, right? And so I went one time because there was a call and I was like, oh, I'm mysteriously like 10 blocks from this call. So I went as a confirmer and I went up and, a lot of police work is actually kind of just like you're hanging around, right? You're like waiting to see if you're going to like really stay at this house and you're waiting to see if someone's going to get dressed and let you in and you're waiting. So I went up to a couple officers and I said, hey, I'm just taking my dog for a walk in the neighborhood and I'm wondering, like, I've got some neighbors who are kind of scared. What are you up to? And this guy worked for Aurora Police and they don't have a great reputation, but he was like, oh, hey, like this is like a drug bust and we're here with DEA and this is what we're doing. And I said, oh, is ICE part of that? And are you guys doing any collaboration or working with ICE? And they said, no, this doesn't have anything to do with immigration. And he was very calm. I was not asking him in the middle of him like knocking down a door or anything, right? He was clearly like in a position to be able to talk to me. And police officers should be trained to do that, right? In fact, in Denver, so we've had several people, of course, go and talk to folks who end up being local police in Denver. Denver cops have been trained by the current police chief to carry their business cards with them at all times. And so Jordan Garcia, one of the main people that helps staff CORRN, he'll go up and be like, hey, what's your name? What's your badge number? What are you guys doing? Okay, ICE isn't involved. Are you sure? Oh, you're with the police force. Can I have your business card? And the guy's like, oh yeah, I left him in the car. And Jordan's like, well, I kind of need one. And he's like, okay. And he like shuffled back to his car and got Jordan, just a random citizen, his his badge card, right? And like that's what police, they're working for us, right? And so absolutely. But is it scary as heck the first time you do it? Yes, right? But you absolutely have the right to for full transparency. Otherwise, it's a secret police force, right? So you absolutely have the right to do that.
And in that same vein, someone said, if we ask questions, can't we be accused of interference? I guess the real question is, at what point does it go from just asking questions to interference?
Yeah, and that's probably a legal question that at some point would maybe
Mhm.
come up if things escalated enough. I think you start filming so you can show how reasonable you are. So what some people will do is they will film and then they will film their feet and they will film like going a pan up to show where the police officer is, to show that you are not obstructing, you're not in their way, you're not blocking them, you are asking for information as you have a right to do. So I think filming helps you out there. I think, like, obviously touching a police officer, grabbing at them, standing between them and the target that they have, all of those things are going to put you at more risk. But at some point, that's going to become a very specific legal question that I don't have the answer to.
I know Trump has been threatening to denaturalize naturalized citizens. Someone asked, can they really denaturalize a naturalized citizen? I think that's something that has to go through a court process. I think there are certain conditions under which that can happen, but I don't know the specifics.
Yeah, there are very limited conditions for that to happen. Um, Trump is doing what he does, which is to threaten really broad sweeping powers that he doesn't have. That's not currently a thing that is happening at all, but I don't have like the full legal breakdown on that. There actually is information on those threats also at the National, gosh, I always forget their name, Immigration Law Center.
Uh-huh. All right. I think that's it for what I see right now. Would anyone else like to ask a question?
Yeah, this is great. Thank you guys. If you have questions, feel free to email me. Keep in mind, I'm just a volunteer community activist like you guys, but I will do my best to write you back during my breaks at work. And thank you so much to Tiffany for hosting me. It's really great. The more people we get trained up, the better, right?
Yeah, thank you for doing this presentation. I just dropped the hotline in the chat one more time. Can you put your email in there again?
Yeah.
And then I'm also gonna put the links from earlier tonight from the intro in there one more time for everybody. Reminder, there is a new Legal Observer Zoom training or another Legal Observer Zoom training tomorrow. That's conducted by Aurora from Transrooted, who did an amazing job in the one that I watched last week. And she is, and we are putting together a rapid response legal observer team. And so if that's something you want to coordinate on, Lena, do you guys have legal observers that go out with your team?
Yeah, we've been I think stuff, we had like Trump 1, Biden, Trump 2. And so I think like trying to ramp up legal observers is another thing on people's radar. So it'd be good to find out like where those overlaps might be. So yeah, I'd be interested for sure.
Okay, yeah, we can talk more about that. And another reminder, our awesome Resist hats and No Kings hats are up on the store. We just started working with a new artist, Sean J. Marshall out of New York. So we're gonna have some really cool new t-shirts and hats soon. And I'm just grabbing these last couple of links and it looks like maybe there's another question in the chat for you, Lena. Here, I'll grab it in 1 second. It was, do you have Adopt a Corner at your local Home Depots? We observe, record, report, and warn workers.
We don't have stuff right now, at least CORRN doesn't, that's like proactively monitoring at-risk places. I think things could change in the future, but right now it's true we're very much a rapid reactive response, right? So we get a call and we go. Do you know of anybody in any other parts of the immigrant rights or pro-democracy world, Tiffany, that's doing anything like that?
I don't. I know there have been some protests at Home Depots or more like gatherings of showing solidarity at Home Depots. But those people, most of them aren't trained to observe and report and warn workers. So no, nothing that I know of yet in Colorado.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lena. And yeah, I think that was Sean or Tian asked if if we have any hoodies. We don't yet. I made a really cool hoodie for myself to test out one of the brands and see if we like it. It's a white hoodie and it's got the Ice Outta Denver logo on the back. Here, I'll show you guys a picture of it. It looks like the Straight Outta Compton album cover. Yeah, I'll put that in the chat. That was a fun one to make. We actually sold a bunch of merch at the vigil on Monday, and all those proceeds are going straight to Jeanette Viscara and her family. Mary was saying they also film ICE vehicles as they leave Terminal Island with license plates. I know that the Court Watch group, I believe they are tracking things like license plates, but ICE, as far as I know, they haven't seen ICE at the courthouse since the summer, which could definitely be due to their involvement there, which is great. But they are still there to give immigrants information on their rights as they go into court. All right, well, we're a little bit past 7:30, so in honor of everyone's time, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But thank you so much, Lena. Everyone says thank you in the chat that this has been really informative.